In this video, I'll show you how you can preview real fabric behavior directly on your model in Plushify, so you can see how fluffy, dense or shaggy your plushie will look before you ever cut fabric. This is the model of my griffin plushie. A griffin has features of both an eagle and a lion, which means we need a variety of different fabrics and materials to get it right. For the beak and the claws, we will use a short pile minky fur. Most of the body will have a medium-length teddy fur. And for the majestic mane, we need a long, fluffy fabric. Additionally, we want to embroider details like eyes, nostrils, and whatever these stripes on the arms are called. We have already loaded the model in Plushify, assigned colors, and placed our embroidered details. However, the model does not look very fluffy yet. What we see right now is the base geometry of the 3D model. This is what Plushify uses to calculate the sewing pattern. However, the final plushie will use fluffy fabric, which will give it more volume than we see right here. To get a better understanding of how our fabric choice influences the visual appearance of the final plushie, we can define properties in the fabrics section. Let's start with the main body fabric. Currently, the length of the fur is set to 0. Let's fix this. For this plushie, I use a 1.3 cm or half-inch fur, so let's set it with this slider. As you can see, the 3D rendering takes the fur length into account, and areas that use this fabric are now fluffy. Let's apply the fur length to the other fabrics we use for this model. If you need more precise controls for the fur settings, you can also just enter numbers in the input fields. This allows you to use fabrics that are longer than the maximum range of the slider. For minky fabrics, we use a very short pile, around 0.3 cm. For the mane, we want to use a big, long, fluffy fabric. Let's use 5 cm or 2 inches for this one. In the model preview, we immediately see the effect of the different fabrics, which gives us a better intuition of how the final plushie will look like. Let's have a look at the other fabric properties you can set. Next up, we have density. This controls how dense the fur is. In particular, lowering the density removes shorter hairs from the fabric, leaving only the few required to still reach the fur length we specified. Think of it as removing the down hair. This effect gets more pronounced when we play around with the structure slider. A fabric with higher structure will have the hairs clumped together more, while fabric with less structure will have finer hairs and a less defined silhouette. Here, I increase the structure of our mane, giving it more of a shaggy look. Together with the density controls, we can simulate fur with just a few long strands, or add a thicker undercoat by increasing density. Lastly, we have bend, which is an angle between 0 and 90 degrees that controls how much the fur leans in its direction. If we set this to 0, the fibers will stand straight up, as if charged with static electricity. If we set it to 90 degrees, the fur fibers will lay completely flat. For this to work correctly, the fur direction must be set in the pattern section. So if I would, for example, set the fur direction of the mane to be the other way around, we would see that it would look wrong. This is also a helpful way to make sure you set the fur direction correctly. Let's have a closer look at the markings of the model. Markings are details that are usually embroidered or appliqued onto the fur. As a result, the markings sink into the fur. This effect is replicated in Plushify. Still, you see that the surrounding fur can overlap the marking as it bends with the fur direction. If you have really long fur, this can hide parts of the marking, which also happens in real life. If you adjust the marking size and orientation, the corresponding handles will also sink into the fur. If you have trouble getting the marking position correct when the fur is in the way, you can temporarily reduce the fur length. Finally, let's see how size has an influence on the visuals. With Plushify, you can freely choose the size of the plushie you want to make. However, if you use fur with a pile length of 1 cm and the plushie is only 10 cm big, then the fur will look much fluffier than on a bigger plushie. This relationship is also visible in Plushify. So if you're wondering why your model looks fluffier than expected with your fabric settings, or if the fur looks too short, then make sure that your project has the right size set. I hope this feature helps you make more confident fabric choices for your projects. Keep creating, and see you next time.